Hi everyone, my name is Anelise. Welcome back to my channel. I feel like it's been a minute since I've sat down and made a video, and it has. I haven't filmed a video since before my husband and I were baptized, which was on the 18th. I took a couple weeks off from making YouTube videos just to kind of prepare and have some time of internal reflection and everything. So the video that went up last week was filmed several weeks ago, the one about my orthodontic treatment. I'll link it if you're interested in watching, but today we're talking about something completely different. Today I wanted to talk about marriage. More specifically, I have been making some content on the other apps, the short form apps, talking about how... Go out the window. There's a fly. Well, to start off, I'll just say I have found myself in a fairly traditional marriage. This is not something that was really on my bingo card for my life, but when it happened, when I met my husband, when I met the right man, my husband, everything just kind of shifted and fell into place for me in a way that I've never experienced before. I was raised pretty much non-religious, pretty much secular, definitely on the more liberal side. That was just kind of what I assumed my worldview would always be. And first and foremost, the main thing that shifted in meeting my husband, and just that has shifted in my mindset, and the main factor that has reshaped my worldview has been religion. My husband and I, as I mentioned, were just baptized into the Orthodox Christian Church, and that faith that we share and the church that we attend shape every single facet of our lives, how we live, the choices we make, and the way that we see the world. In a very unexpected and long circuitous way, which I could certainly talk about more in another video, I have found myself in a relatively traditional marriage, in a Christian marriage. And along with that, I've also been doing a little bit more research into politics, into some of the different beliefs that for me were once just completely unquestioned, kind of common sense, and that I now don't really hold anymore at all. What I've come to realize really is that I never held those beliefs in the first place. I've just been kind of chronically online in my teens and early 20s. And one thing that I've really realized that has been a huge perspective shift for me is that I would much rather rely on my husband, the person that I know and love and trust, and who knows and loves and trusts me. And I would much rather rely on him with the beautiful, intimate relationship that we have to care for me, provide for me, and protect me, as opposed to relying on the state or a government entity. Now, I'm not an expert on politics and government by any stretch. That's not really the point of this video. What is the point of this video is that I've been sharing that sentiment more online, more so on like short form content, things to the effect of like, well, I would much rather have my husband, I feel much more comfortable trusting this man that I know and who has proven himself to me time and time again in an intimate relationship, who shares a community with me and has, there's a lot of social responsibility, intimacy, and again, trust. I know him, I know his character. I've experienced it. He has exhibited it to me many times. In sharing the sentiment that I would much rather rely on my husband than anyone or anything else, the overwhelming kind of rejection that I get in sharing that belief is like, well, what if your husband blank? What if your husband cheats on you? What if your husband dies? What if he leaves you? What if he becomes disabled? All of those types of things. That's kind of the immediate knee-jerk response that I'll get from people who disagree. And today I really wanted to speak to that question. As you'll see, the title of this video, what if your husband blank? And I just wanted to kind of talk about and cover my response to that, my opinion and my perspective, and ultimately why that question or those possibilities do not stop me from still holding this belief and trusting my husband to provide for me. So I'll start with sharing my intention, which is our intention in being married. Our intention in being married is to have a healthy marriage and to raise a family, to have children. I see marriage as the smallest building block of a community. Marriages create families and families create communities. And community is something that is extremely important to me, especially in having my faith. It is very important to me to be able to raise my children in this faith community, the Orthodox Christian community, so that they can go on to contribute to it and also benefit from it, because it is just been the biggest blessing in my life, the community and more broadly the faith overall. So that is our overarching main intention. There are a lot more facets and particulars that go into it, but the point is that my husband and I have this unity of intention of why we were interested in each other, why we got married, why we are married, what we're doing, where we're going. We are on the same page with that, and that is in no small part due to the premarital counseling questions that we answered, that we went over when we were, I believe it was after we were engaged. Now, I had we had a very close older couple kind of walk us through this counseling process, these questions, and basically the questions were about every facet of life. It was, what do you see, like, what is your idea of a husband? What is your idea of a wife? How do you see things working in this situation? How do you see things working in that situation? How do you resolve conflict? The questions went through everything. And the way that we went about it was that my husband and I took time to answer these questions individually. We wrote down our answers separately on our own time without talking about anything beforehand. And then after we had already written down and thought about and established our answers, then we came together to discuss. And the point of this discussion was not to, figure out who had the better answer and go with that. The point of this discussion was basically to see how we could both be right, to see how both of our viewpoints could be honored, and how we could live a life that both my perspective and his perspective are being taken into account. So we went through, it was at least 20 good, solid, deep questions that we fully went in depth on and answered and discussed. And we wrote all of it down, right? So now we not only have discussed this, we discussed this when we were engaged, because at this point, right, like, we were committed, you know what I mean? It wasn't like, are we doing this? It was like, no, we are doing this. How are we going to do this? Because we are two people, and the point of marriage is to be two people becoming one. And in my opinion, anyway, that doesn't happen accidentally. So we were very blessed to have that opportunity to be really intentional going into our marriage before we ever officially got married, to be already thinking about this. And then we have this document written down with his answers, my answers, kind of our reflections. And this has served more or less as our marriage constitution. And that's something that we get to revisit whenever we need, to just kind of discuss and remind ourselves and to reunify if and when we need to. So those questions were extremely helpful in solidifying our intention, making sure that we were rock solid. And I did kind of put them together in like a little document that I will link in the description below. It's totally free. There's just a link to download it down there. It was so instrumental and so helpful, and there is really something to be said for going in on something together, for having a shared purpose and a shared vision, and really like expressing and articulating that in no uncertain terms. Doing that alone makes it so much more likely to be able to live it out. That is a great first step, and it is a huge step in the right direction to have a successful marriage. But in order to actually be faithful to this intention and to to remain in and return to this oneness, it really requires a lot of relationship skills. And that, for me, is something that is a woman's role more specifically. Not that my husband is not putting effort into our relationship, he absolutely is. But my perspective on women is that we are emotional leaders in relationships, and we really get to dictate the emotional quality of a relationship. And that being said, I kind of saw that I had a lot of work that I needed to do in order to actually make that happen. And I continue to have a lot of work to do in that area. That's something that I am always working on and always thinking about. And unfortunately, there are less and less positive marriage examples in the world today. It's a very sad reality that, just, what is it? Half of marriages end in divorce. So it's not always easy to find good relationship advice, or even, find people who have any advice to share on the matter at all. So for me, it came down to reading a couple books. Not just a couple, but there are a couple books that I found that were extremely helpful in helping me understand my position as a wife, my advantages as a wife, the skills that I have and the skills that I need to develop, and all of the different tools that I can use in order to make our marriage thrive. So I'll just quickly share those. Honestly, the relationship books, the marriage books that I've read, kind of warrant their own entire video, so let me know if you want that. I can definitely make that happen. I have 2 books that I'll share right now. I could probably drum up a couple more, but these are kind of the main ones. The first one is The Queen's Code by Alison Armstrong. It looks a little hokey, right? But the inside, the information inside is so good, and it's honestly advanced womanhood, women's wisdom, women's wiles, the kind of information that, in my opinion, has been very much so lost in our modern world, that women used to pass down from mother to daughter on how to have a good relationship and be a good wife and a good woman. And those relationship skills, I don't think they get talked about anymore. And I think we are really seeing the effects of that in our modern world and in our divorce rate. But this book goes super in depth into that, and just women's unique role and strengths. And this book is very much the same. It's called The Empowered Wife by Laura Doyle. This one I read first. This one I read before I was ever even dating to marry. I read it so long ago because one of my favorite YouTubers recommended it. She spoke very highly of it. It's Mrs. Midwest. I will link her channel. She's fab. And then this book, I don't quite remember. I think I just kind of started seeing clips of podcast interviews with the author, Alison Armstrong, online, and I got curious enough to check out the book, and boy, was I really, really floored. So to be completely honest with you, reading those books and learning about those relationship skills is one thing. Putting them into practice has been a completely other animal, if you will. And that's something that I'm definitely still working on, and working on making it kind of second nature. I definitely have poor relationship habits that I have to work to break and move on from, and just be more healthy in my communication and all the things. So all of that to say, to relate this back to the question, what are you gonna do if your husband leaves? To that I say, there is so much in a woman, in a wife's power to dictate, as I said, the emotional quality of a relationship. I firmly believe that. I kind of look at this work as a form of insurance. I know from observation that these are the kinds of things that many people neglect in relationships. These books have their own statistics and anecdotes that they share regarding that, that to me have been very compelling, that there is a lot that a woman, specifically a wife, can do to make sure the marriage is good and keep her husband around. But of course, with that being said, there are limitations, right? Because even if I do all the work in the world to make the relationship a healthy and happy and inviting place that is nourishing for both myself and my husband, he could still leave. There are no guarantees in this life, right? He could leave, he could die, he could become disabled. That doesn't really address all those questions. Even if we have the most possible unity and a unified intention in our marriage, stuff happens, right? I definitely don't want to gloss over that by any means. There are, that is a reality for so many people. All of those different things that people mention, those are realities, those things happen. And they're incredibly unfortunate. And I deeply feel for anybody who finds himself in that situation. As much as I believe that there are factors within my control, I equally believe that there are many factors that are completely outside of my control, as is the case for everyone. There are just things that we cannot predict for, and even if we could predict them, there is nothing that we could do to prevent them. With that being said, my focus in my life is never going to be on the factors that are outside of my control. I always strive to be thinking about what is in my control, what I can do, how I can empower myself in any situation. And when it comes to marriage, I am always striving to consider what kind of marriage I want to have and taking action towards that. And there are so many factors that are within our control. One of the main things that I focused on was picking a partner with intention. I was absolutely disinterested in marriage with anybody that I dated previous to my husband because I knew that the standard for that quality and kind of relationship simply was not there. Ultimately, the only thing that we do have control of in our life is ourselves and our responses to the situations that are presented to us. And that's why I try to keep that as my focus. What should I be doing? How can I be better? And showing up in humility and service and being willing to grow and change as needed, which I will admit is very painful and uncomfortable at times, but that doesn't mean it's not worthwhile. At the end of the day, like I said, there are so many things that we cannot predict for, that we can't avoid, we can't control, but our minds see more of what we focus on. So it's always my goal and intention to focus on the things that I want to see more of, to focus on having a thriving, flourishing marriage, because that's what I want to see in my life. So yes, my husband could leave me. Yes, my husband could die or become disabled, or any number of crazy circumstances could happen that would no longer make it possible for me to rely on him as a provider and protector for our family. But my mindset on that is that we will cross that bridge when we get to it. And actually, no, let me amend that. We will cross that bridge if we get to it, because it's not even a guarantee that any of those things will happen. Again, those situations are real. I deeply feel for anyone who is in that situation, but I am not going to spend my life living in fear of a reality that does not even exist for me. Ultimately, all of those things are outside of my control and above my pay grade. There are smart financial moves that you can make to prepare your family as a just-in-case kind of padding situation. This is not something that I really feel comfortable sharing on too much because I'm not an expert at all, but one example could be a life insurance policy. Another example that people always talk about is having a marketable skill, or a skill as a wife that I could use to make money. And I think pretty much every wife has a skill that they could use to make money. So, I don't say that to be cavalier about the situation, but to me, that's just kind of a part of being a functioning human. And there are many different situations. For me, I'm 25. I have worked before, I work right now, and I make YouTube videos as a hobby, which of course we know has the potential to also earn income. In that regard, I'm again, not too worried about it. I'll figure it out. I have a support system as well that extends well beyond solely my husband. I have family. We have a church community. We have parents that love us and also extended family. So we are not isolated. We do not live in a vacuum. And yes, it would be absolutely horrible if something happened to my husband, and it would be incredibly challenging for our family in ways that I'm sure I cannot even imagine. But ultimately, I am going to choose faith over fear in the way that I live my life. To some people, it may seem foolish, but I have made the intentional decision to pour all of my time and effort and energy into doing everything that is within my control to create my desired reality, the one that is the most beautiful that I can possibly imagine, raising a family and having a traditional marriage where I get to be the primary caregiver for my children, and my husband, out of the generosity of his heart, provides for us, because that is something that we have discussed at length and come to an agreement on. I would much rather spend my time into that, and I choose to pour into that as opposed to spending my time and energy and effort dreading an outcome that I do not desire. This is absolutely an exercise of faith, and I do not know what the future holds or how it will turn out, but there are simply no guarantees in life. This whole kind of thought process for me was kind of set off by a book that I read and also a TikTok that I saw talking about how socialism and universal childcare allow for women to have the freedom to work. And as I said, I would rather trust my husband to provide for our family so that I can raise the children than trust universal childcare to raise the children so that I can provide for my family. And all I really want to say on that is that either way, there are no guarantees in this life. And this is something that I'm still kind of wrestling with, but I think that a lot of modern issues that people want to believe can be solved by government or a certain kind of government, there are just no guarantees. And not even the government can guarantee certain things. But in my life and my experience, weighing and measuring my options, knowing that there are no guarantees and things could completely go awry anyway, I would rather trust my husband than any outside entity, non-human entity, faceless non-human entity. I'll take my husband over that any day. But really, in this video, I just kind of wanted to share my thought process behind that. That's all I have. Thank you so much for listening to my story. Thank you so much for being here and watching this video. There's plenty more where that came from, and there's plenty more coming. Please do not be shy. Let me know what you thought in the comments down below. I know you will anyway. Thanks for watching. I will see you in the next one. Bye.